Hi, welcome to the World Beneath Our Feet series. Episode 1, Dying for Lawns and Food. I'm your host, Renee Béchard. And in this video, I am going to talk about the hazards of herbicides and pesticides, our desire for a perfect lawn, and the dangerous use of chemicals from agricultural farming. While many people believe that using chemicals to kill weeds and pests are harmless, the truth is these chemicals are toxic to all living things, including our domestic pets, wildlife, and humans. Where did the American obsession for a weedless, insectless green lawn come from? Well, prior to European colonization, the grasses on the east coast of North America were mostly broom straw, wild rye, and marsh grass. As Europeans moved into the region, they brought grass seed from Europe. After the European grass seed spread throughout the colonies, much of the native grasses of New England disappeared. New colonists were urged to bring grass seed with them to North America. By the late 17th century, a new market in imported grass seed had begun in New England. Much of the new grasses brought by Europeans spread quickly and effectively. Kentucky bluegrass is a grass native to Europe and the Middle East and is now one of the top pasture grasses in the United States and the most desirable species of grass for lawns. In 18th century France and England, the use of green, expansive spaces began to appear in landscape design. Thomas Jefferson was impressed by the green turf and tried to emulate the style at Monticello. Even George Washington hired English landscape gardeners at Mount Vernon. Images of Washington's gardens and lawn were produced and distributed throughout the United States, which then began to influence prominent, wealthy American homeowners in landscape architecture. It wasn't until well after the Civil War did maintained lawn care reach the American middle class. After World War II and the housing boom, many families expanded out from the cities into the suburbs where most homes had a small plot of land sporting a lawn. This is when lawn manicuring and garden club competitions really took off and the demand grew for lawn beautification products. Weeds really do come down to fashion. Once clover was considered a desirable lawn plant, much like the dandelion. Today, these magnificent plants are labeled weeds and are on the lawn manicurist's death row list. The clover plant is quite excellent for lawns as it helps maintain soil moisture and nourishes the soil as it is a natural producer of nitrogen. Clover feeds and nourishes pollinators, which sustains our ecosystems. Dandelions were once considered a very desirable flowering plant. They were used to make tea and wine, and ancient physicians used dandelions to help with many ailments such as heartburn, kidney, stomach, and liver disorders, just to name a few. They are rich in vitamin C, E, and A, as well as calcium, potassium, zinc, and iron. Scientists have linked the drastic decline in bee population to the eradication of clover, dandelions, and other weeds. Yet for the sake of the lush green lawn, humans poison these plants with pesticides and herbicides, contributing to the actual decline of life. What is a pesticide and an herbicide? Pesticides are designed to eliminate insects, mammals, birds, and microorganisms, which means any living creature that is deemed harmful or a nuisance to crops or plants. Herbicides are actually a type of pesticide that specifically targets weeds or unwanted plants. Many homeowners depend on what is called broad-spectrum pesticides to keep their lawns weed and bug-free. Broad-spectrum pesticides use powerful toxic chemicals that target entire groups of organisms that are harmful to plants and insects. DDT, first synthesized in 1874, came to market in 1945 for agricultural and household pesticide use. Eventually, the U.S. banned DDT in 1972, citing its adverse environmental effects to wildlife and potential human health risks. In 2004, most of the world's countries adopted an agreement called the Stockholm Convention that banned or restricted DDT. Today, DDT is only used in certain countries, mainly to kill mosquitoes that cause malaria. The herbicide 2,4-D came on the market in 1945 and was a widely used chemical herbicide that changed the game for farmers. They could easily spray 2,4-D on their fields, which would kill more weeds than any amount of cultivating. Also, it is interesting to note that 2,4-D was a component of Agent Orange used in the Vietnam War, and it continues to be used today. In 2015, the International Agency for Research on Cancer declared 2,4-D a possible human carcinogen based on evidence that it damages human cells and, in a number of studies, cause cancer in laboratory animals. There are reports that 2,4-D can decrease fertility and raise the risk of birth defects. Glyphosate, a toxic chemical herbicide, was first synthesized in 1950 by Swiss chemist Henri Martin. In 1970, glyphosate was discovered to be an effective herbicide, and in 1974, Monsanto brought glyphosate to market under the trade name Roundup. Glyphosate is among the most widely used weed killers in the world. It is used on crops, lawns, gardens, parks, and playgrounds. As glyphosate herbicides are sprayed on hundreds of agricultural crops worldwide, here are some facts to consider. Glyphosate cannot be removed through washing or cooking. The half-life or the time it takes for half of the ingredient to degrade ranges from 3 to 250 days. This range means that glyphosate remains active in the soil for nearly a year. USDA microbiologists found that glyphosate leaches through the roots of dead weeds into the soil, upsetting the balance of beneficial microorganisms to harmful ones, and glyphosate can and does leach into the groundwater, especially in rural farming areas, which is a concern for those whose water consumption is from wells. A meta-analysis published in Mutation Research Reviews in Mutation Research reported a compelling link between glyphosate-based herbicides and non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. 3 of the study authors were members of the EPA Scientific Advisory Panel on Glyphosate, who have stated publicly that the EPA failed to follow proper scientific practices in its glyphosate assessment. Roundup generates more than $6 billion a year for Monsanto, which is now owned by Bayer. Juries in 3 trials all found in favor of plaintiffs who alleged they developed non-Hodgkin's lymphoma due to their use of Roundup or other Monsanto herbicides made with glyphosate. Thousands of people have filed similar claims as well. Interestingly, Bayer has earmarked more than $14 billion to try and settle all of the U.S. Roundup litigation. However, many plaintiffs have refused to settle and cases continue to go to trial. Roundup with glyphosate continues to remain on the market in the United States. There are no plans to ban glyphosate. However, some states have prohibited or restricted its use. Bayer recently announced they will reformulate Roundup for residential lawn and garden use in 2023. The move is exclusively geared at managing litigation risks and not because of any safety concerns. Because crops are becoming more and more resistant to pesticide and herbicide chemicals, including glyphosate, the agricultural industry has turned to other, more toxic chemicals such as paraquat, one of the most toxic chemicals of them all. Paraquat was synthesized in 1882, but its role as an herbicide was discovered in 1955. It was first produced for commercial purposes in 1961. Commercial farmers and other agricultural workers in the United States have been using paraquat to control invasive weeds and grasses since 1964. Applicators spray it on more than 100 types of crops, including row crops, orchards, fruits, and vegetables. Worldwide, paraquat is still one of the most commonly used herbicides. In the United States, due to its toxicity, paraquat is available for use only by commercially licensed users. In 2011, the U.S. National Institutes of Health study showed a link between paraquat use and Parkinson's disease in farm workers. The American Parkinson's Disease Association has conducted studies that found an increased risk of Parkinson's disease in people who have been exposed to pesticides containing paraquat. This includes many people living in rural communities such as farmers, people exposed to farm animals, people who live on farms, people with known exposure to pesticides, people who drink well water, people who live in a rural area. Another study of commonly used pesticides found that paraquat had a strong association with development of conditions linked to Parkinson's disease. Additional studies continue to find strong links between long-term exposure to paraquat and later onset of Parkinson's disease. While the most common brand name of paraquat in the United States is Gramoxone, a product that is manufactured by Syngenta, there are numerous other brands under which you can find this herbicide. There are currently at least 14 lawsuits filed by 8 different law firms in 6 different federal courts across the country. The lawsuits are all filed on behalf of plaintiffs who have been diagnosed with the neurodegenerative disorder Parkinson's disease, and they all allege exposure to Syngenta's paraquat caused their conditions. Paraquat is banned in 32 countries, including the European Union and China.